Hi, it's Lori Neverman from Common Sense Homesteading, and today we're going to be making a take on Indian pudding. Now I start out with 5 cups of milk, which I've gently heated here in a very large sauce pot, and to that I'm going to add 2/3 cup of cornmeal. Now this gets cooked on the stove top for about 10 minutes. We sprinkle it over the top, we whisk it in, and then we keep stirring until it starts to thicken. As I said, that's going to be about 10 minutes. So next up, hot milk, and then we're going to add our cornmeal. Okay, so here we have our nice warm milk. You don't want to boil this, but you do want to get it nice and warm. And I'm going to sprinkle my cornmeal over the top and then whisk that in. Now this is going to be slowly cooked, whisking continuously for about 10 minutes or so. You want to make sure that doesn't settle to the bottom and scorch, and it distributes evenly in the milk. So patience is a virtue here. And I'll keep whisking and whisking, and then eventually that should start to thicken up. And then we'll be ready to add the rest of the ingredients and get it in the oven. Okay, this took a little bit longer to cook than 10 minutes because I had a coarser cornmeal, but if you look, you can see how it's resisting the movement of the whisk. So it has finally started to thicken up. And I'm going to stir this a little bit longer, and then we're going to add the rest of our ingredients. So we've got salt, and then we're going to grab the spices. First up, there's ginger, and it's going to take me a minute to get the lid off. I've got half a teaspoon of ginger once I get in here. That mostly leveled off, doesn't have to be exact. And set that aside. And then I've got cinnamon. You see I adjusted the top of the cinnamon jar so it's easy to get nice level teaspoons out. We've also got our dried cranberries. It's 1 cup of those. 4 tablespoons of butter. Just drop that right in there, and then it'll melt as I get the other ingredients in. Maple syrup. And clean that last little bit out of there. And finally, the molasses. Now traditionally it's made with just the molasses, but I like maple syrup. I'm a fan, so I'm going to switch some of that out a little bit and get the 2 of them in there. And that is a little bit sticky and messy, so I'll just try to clean it out as best we can. Wipe it off on the spatula. And last little drips. Calling it good enough. Okay. Kind of whisk that all in and keep stirring and stirring until that is all nicely blended. You can see you want to make sure to get to the bottom of the pan so your cornmeal doesn't scorch. And you can see that butter starting to melt. Now this cooks for a little while on top of the stove to get everything, we'll get the butter melted and make sure everything is evenly mixed. And then we're going to transfer that to the pan to bake for a couple hours. So while I was waiting, I snuck in and greased my pan. You really should grease your baking dish with a little bit of butter or coconut oil or fat of your choice, so it's a little bit easier to get the pudding out when it's finished. And I preheated my oven to 300 degrees. And I know it doesn't look like much, but it actually tastes pretty good. If you like things like spice cake or pumpkin pie, other nice seasonal fall recipes, you'll probably like the Indian pudding too. And we're getting close. You can see it's pretty thick. You know, you watch the movement of the whisk here, and you can see there's some resistance against the whisk, so you know that it's thickening up nicely. That cornmeal has absorbed the liquid from the milk, and it's not going to be nasty and gritty. It's going to be rich and creamy when it's all finished baking. Almost done. A little bit more, a little bit more. Come on, melt you darn little bit of butter. Okay, scrape down all the edges and make sure everything is incorporated. Okay, tap that off, set it aside. And I've got my pan, which I mentioned that I had prepped earlier. I'm going to pour that in there. And try to spread those cranberries out. Make sure they're all in and spread around the pan as you're pouring. This is pretty hot, so be careful not to burn yourself. Get in all those little nooks and crannies. Scrape it all out, make sure it all gets in the pot instead of being left on the stove. And that last little bit, almost done. At some point, you just call it close enough. I think that's good. Yep, just a little bit more. Okay, now set that aside. Be careful, again, it's hot. And then we're going to put this in the oven. So set that in the oven. You can also boil puddings on top of the stove. That was how it was traditionally done, with a pudding bag and then dipped in boiling water for several hours, but this is easier. All right, set the timer for 2 hours. Start. Okay, so our timer's just gone off and it's time to take the Indian pudding out of the oven. Now if we take a look at this, I'm going to stop for a moment. We're going to get a zoom in here. Now you can look and see the edges are sort of crispy and the center is soft set. It's still a little bit of bubbly, but it's not floppy. So we'll let this cool just slightly, and then normally you want to serve this up while it's still warm with a little bit of ice cream or whipped cream. And there you go. Indian pudding with a little bit of maple syrup and dried cranberries.